A final word, hopefully, on Rob Ford. We saw today Justice Minister Peter McKay virtually clam up on Toronto's crack-smoking mayor. Now, you might think that our chief law officer would have a strong condemnation of Ford, who now openly admits that he breaks the law. But the most that McKay could muster was a weak shake of the head. Why? Well, remember, Ford is a Conservative, and he commands still a lot of votes in the GTA. The federal Conservatives need every single one of them, so they don't want to offend Ford Nation. This whole farce, which is quickly becoming tragedy, could happen again if the political class can't find the moral courage to say there really is a line that can't be crossed. It's a sad day when partisanship trumps principle.
Well, Rob Ford was one of many topics on the agenda when federal NDP leader Thomas Mulcair made his campaign-style swing through Victoria yesterday. His visit included a stop here for a sit-down one-on-one with Hudson Mack. Tonight, some of the highlights from part one of that interview.
Let's begin with what's been a rough couple of weeks for public office in this country, from Toronto City Hall to the Senate. Yep. And let's get Rob Ford out of the way right now.
What's exactly what we think should happen as well.
What's your take? Is it time for the Ontario Premier to step in if she can?
There's no question that the provincial government has a lot of authority there. I think that the people who have been giving interviews, who are the family and friends of Rob Ford, should start talking to him very openly and say, look, you have to move aside. It's Canada's most important city. It's our economic hub for all economic activity in our country. It can't continue with this gong show. So he's got to move on.
And the country has become a laughingstock.
Well, when you make David Letterman's top 10 list, you know that all's left is the laughter. And unfortunately, he even showed up wearing a football jersey. I mean, things are not going well.
Yeah. You know what I found interesting with the remark that he made this week was that of all the things that have happened, it was the vulgarity that was the tipping point for many Canadians.
Yeah, we got there a little bit before that. I mean, it was clear that when he admitted that he'd smoked crack, that there was a serious problem. Then he admitted that he had broken the law during his mandate. So I don't think there's much left to be said. He should just be gone and face the facts.
In a similar vein, you have the same kind of view of what's going on in the Senate.
But we've had that opinion on the Senate for about 50 years, Hudson. Don't forget, the NDP has always said that we're a democracy. Our institutions should be just that. People who are elected should make laws for the rest of us, not insiders and party favorites and bagmen, whether Conservative or Liberal. The only party standing up on this issue now is the NDP. The Conservatives have done nothing in their 8 years in power to change the Senate. The Liberals think that the only problem with the Senate is that there are not enough Liberal senators. So we think the Canadians deserve better. It's unelected, it's unaccountable, and now it's under indictment. And we think that in a democracy, there's no reason to have this relic from our British colonial past. The House of Lords might work fine in England. We don't need that here.
So you'd get rid of it?
Purely and simply. We've been saying why we would get rid of it. The Supreme Court's about to tell us how we can get rid of it. But in the meantime, we're clear with Canadians. We want a mandate in 2015 to finally move ahead. And for once, there's an alignment of the stars where Canadians are talking about it. A lot of people see what the problem is, and they're asking the NDP to move forward.
The Senate scandal's been pretty good for you politically, though. You've been landing some punches in the House of Commons during question period. Have you caught the Prime Minister in a lie?
Several times. I mean, when you ask someone whether his chief of staff was fired or he quit, and he gives you two completely different answers, both can't be true. So one of them's false, that's clear. He said on June 5th that the only person on his staff who knew was Nigel Wright. We now know that at least a dozen other people were aware of it. So he's been caught in a series of things, and it's by asking him very short questions, yes, no, that he's finally laid that trap for himself. So Canadians now know he can't be trusted on these important issues, but now we want to know what actually happened.
The conversation will continue tomorrow night with Mulcair's thoughts on Justin Trudeau, the proposed Northern Gateway pipeline, plus some deeper party issues, including are Canadians ready for an NDP government? That's tomorrow. Back on the island, federal NDP leader Thomas Mulcair spent the early part of the weekend in Victoria. He met with supporters, most of them seniors, insisting that the Orange Crush still has a grip on the West Coast. He also met with Hudson Mack for a one-on-one. Here's highlights from the second half of that interview, beginning with Mulcair's thoughts on the NDP and its outgoing leader here in BC.
I have a lot of time for Adrian Dix. He's a magnificent individual, extraordinary politician. Things didn't work out. We've learned lessons from that campaign. What could have been done better? What could have been done differently? I've always taken the approach that being positive is in fact a good thing, but that doesn't stop me from criticizing what I think is wrong with my opponent. It's a little bit like your bike, you know, you have to have the push and the pull. So we're going to be doing that. We'll talk about, for example, what the Liberals used to do, which was promise to get rid of the GST and then never do it, say that they have a long history of promising one thing and then doing another in power. And with regard to the Conservatives, Canadians really are tired. So to hear the Conservatives and Liberals tell it, Canadians don't have a choice. They have to alternate between Conservative corruption and Liberal corruption. We say otherwise. We think that an NDP government would provide good, clean government in the public interest. That's the offer that we're proposing in 15.
Voters say they don't like negative ads, but they work.
But it's not necessarily a question of an attack on an individual, which I would never do. But you can talk about whether or not they've delivered on what they've said, whether they're capable of doing the job that they're applying for, what their party's done in the past on similar issues. That's part and parcel of politics. That's the rough and tumble of politics, and the public expects you to be able to discuss those things openly.
Northern Gateway, BC and Alberta have made peace, or at least found a roadmap to try to solve their differences. What's your take on that?
It's always good to see provinces get together and agree on something. So Premiers Redford and Clark coming together, but there's a federal responsibility there on two main areas. One is First Nations, and the second is interprovincial. So that's a federal jurisdiction. We no longer have a credible, thorough assessment process for these big projects. Mr. Harper has killed that. He's made it easier to get the regulatory license, but there's not going to be a social license. On Northern Gateway, we're categorical. Allowing super tankers into that pristine coast, into that Douglas Channel, doesn't make any sense at all. So we wouldn't even send that one to hearings. A little bit like I did when I was the Minister of the Environment in Quebec. I said no to a big LNG proposal right across from Quebec City. I had met with the American Coast Guard. They had said, look, in front of a large population like that, we would never build something. They have one in Boston. They said they'd never do it again. So we took that lesson away, and I never allowed it to go to hearings, and the thing's been killed in the meantime. Sometimes you just have to take that sort of command decision. I would do it in the case of Northern Gateway, say a simple categorical no.
In the brief time we have left, tell us something about Tom Mulcair we don't know. What keeps you awake at night?
What keeps me awake at night is trying to make sure that we get in 2015 to do the right thing, to serve the public interest. The only powerful lobby that anybody in my cabinet is ever going to be asked to serve is the public interest. That's what we're working towards. We've got a great team of women and men. I come from a very large family, very modest background. I come from a family of 10 kids. And I've always been involved socially, so were my parents, and it's something that was inculcated into us young. Serve. My wife works with the public. One of our older son is a police officer. Our younger son's a college prof. And we've always served the public, and I'm going to continue to do that.
We appreciate you taking time for us today.
Thank you.
Federal NDP leader Tom Mulcair, thank you for being here.
Thanks for the invitation.
If you missed the first half of the interview or want to watch the whole thing, it will be on our website. That's vancouverisland.ctvnews.ca.